Okay. All right, team. So we are going to talk about some new things. I'm going to give you a little bit extra on the contagion stuff because I just want to clarify some pieces. We'll have some asides just to kind of keep the morale up. And I'll start on centrality. So this is sort of a piece that's an important piece that I need to convey. What's the most important node in a network? That's the driving question, and maybe it's a bad question, but it's a very human kind of question. Who's the most influential person, and how do we get to them, et cetera, instead of thinking about the network. But still, that will lead into structure detection, which is just this vast area, very important. You've played around with it a little bit, I think, probably in Gephi and so on. It's sort of a built-in object now, but even so, there's still a lot of competition there for how to do this, but so we'll look at that. It's a fundamental thing. Okay, so little piece here. All right, I wanted to just quickly get back to the end of this story because I had a couple of things that I felt like I wasn't sure about in the heat of the moment. So this story that comes from Gleason's work. Lots of pieces in here, but the big, you've seen a lot of these objects over and over again. This is the update mechanism as you clock through this contagion process. It could be a very general contagion process. We're thinking about random networks, but generalized ones, so arbitrary degree distributions. This can be modified if we have things like correlations between nodes, but we don't in this. So this is the standard thing where this is a probability that you connect to a degree k node. We'll just get right into this a little bit. And then here's the probability that node that you hit, you look at its k minus 1 other friends, it's a probability that j of them are on, right? So this is the probability that j are infected, where this theta of t is the thing we're updating. Theta of t is we're looking at an arbitrary edge in the network at time t. And we want the others to be off, so that accounts for all of this, and there's a little binomial for how many ways you could choose. So that's this update piece. And then sitting back behind it is a very important thing, which is, well, the node could have been simply on at the start. And if it's not, then this is what's happening as well. All right, so this becomes a iterative map story, right? So this is a quantity between 0 and 1, map. And eventually, once we've got the t equals infinity version of this, or any point, whatever time you want to look at, right? Then you just put it into this equation, which is the probability that a node is on, right? Always about edges, and then we think about what happens with nodes. So I just want to talk a little bit more about this function, right? So we call this G, this little recursion relation here, and I had a few things I may have lied a little bit, but I don't know if I lied. Mild prevarications. Okay, so let's see, what have I scribbled here? Right, so this is our little update piece. And we were interested in what happens for very small seeds. That's a big deal. What happens if there's not much at the start? Boom, even 0. It's possible to have self-starters, so you could have a 0, nothing at all, and then it just starts to take off. But the weird thing about this that's a bit confusing is that this function, that's a semicolon, depends on the initial fraction that are infected. So that function is being modified. You can't just dial it. You can't just choose it, although we'll sort of look like we're doing that. This is possible, for example, right? So it depends on whether your initial, this is the important one I wanted to show you. If we go back and look at this function, if you let's imagine that self-starters don't work. You put 0 in here, the whole thing is 0, right? So, but generally speaking, we're going to have things, so that would mean that the next time step, we just have the initial fraction that are infected, and it doesn't change. But as long as there's some non-zero probability here of something happening, this thing is greater than 0. So theta of 1 is greater than, in general, greater than or equal to theta of 0, right? So the probability that an edge is infected at just the first time step is greater than it was at the initial one. What that means is, when we go back to this picture, is that and I'll expand it here. Yeah. You would never, so you set up your G function and then look at where your initial condition is. It's never going to be here. Because phi 0, right, so phi 0 has to map to a phi 1 that's at least phi 0. It means it's above this line. So this is an important little detail, right? We'll never get this sort of thing where it tracks back to 0, because this would be between a stable and unstable fixed point. So that would be stable and unstable. Your initial condition will just simply never be in there, because phi 0, if you just look at that simple equation, phi 0 maps to something that's at least its size, right? It could just map to a fixed point, which is a bit, but it will, so it could be anywhere in between here. That's possible, and it goes up to the next fixed point. These are, if you're used to the maps of the interval functions, right, usually you're allowed to do whatever you want, right? You have your map of the interval, some function, and you're allowed to choose the initial condition and let it play around. But here the initial condition is tied to the shape of the map, and this is just a detail to say that once you realize the map, you will never, it just can't be the case your initial condition is here. Because it gave this kind of strange thing. We're constructing this contagion process where we know things only switch on and stay on, so it can only get bigger. But what about, this is a bad looking situation because it's dying away. That cannot occur. The other thing to think about here is what maps of the interval you can have, right? You can have some weird shapes, right? And that's going to cause all sorts of bad behavior. But if your slope is never less than, it's always greater than or equal to 0, then you're always only going to have these kind of simple things like this. And as long as you always start above a unstable fixed point, and it means you always track to the next stable fixed point. So there are two things that are very important, right? That phi 0 the initial theta 0, I should say, maps to theta 1, and theta 1 is greater than theta 0, so you're above the y equals x line, and that you always land between so that means you always land between an unstable and a stable fixed point, so you go up. And then we have to have one more thing to think about, which is that the slope of this thing never does anything weird, like, right? This would be a strange business. You would not want, right? If it did something like this, that would be strange. Okay. And if you're playing around with chaos and universe, right, you can do whatever you want. But so that's a bit of a test, actually. So, and these two things are here, right? So your first one you map to is at least the one you started with. It means you're above the curve. And then you need the derivative. I think this is true. I need to actually prove this. The first derivative is greater than or equal to 0. You're never going to get this thing rolling over. By construction, it seems like it should be right? This thing is spreading, so the probability has to be growing.
Or at least not decreasing.
Yeah, greater than or equal to 0, right? Yeah, right. Right. So in fact, if there's no probability of spreading, but you have an initial fraction neuron, yeah, and so your G function just looks like that.
In this model, people only turn on, right? They don't turn off.
Yeah, only turn on.
So then they would have to be.
Yeah, but you have to go and get this function and take the derivative of it.
Yeah.
It's a nice problem.
Is there a work where after some t things turn off?
Yes, yes. And it's generally true of disease spreading models. So SIR, that I to R transition is exactly that. So in disease spreading models, you have that all the time. For this large body of work, the initial work didn't do it, but then it can be generalized. So you have to think about how you're modeling the turning off part. Right? So something spreading through a network, right? Spreading through a network, let's say, and switches this one on, so now we're infected. And then there's a clock running, right? So there's this probability that this one gets infected. So you have to think about that too. Do they, how much are they censusing everyone around them? Do they only look once? Whatever it is. So there's a whole mechanism there, but then there's some probability that this thing transitions back to, right? So you could imagine you can put this in with a sort of a time thing. You can just sort of accumulate it all, right? So what this might translate to is this one gets infected. It has some characteristic timescale for staying infected. and there's some sort of infection probability along here anyway, but you can just sort of merge those things together and say, well, that amounts to a probability of this thing being infected. Right? It's modified a little. It's lower than, if this thing stayed on forever, it's higher, right? Let's say there's probably P that's transmitted along here, just a normal spreading thing. It's a one-off. You know, and you could say, well, let's allow that to happen every time step. P, it gets tested, it gets tested, it gets tested, it gets tested, but then there's a fail here, like this thing turns off. So you could just compute that, you could just sort of work through the math there and figure out what's the actual probability that it gets infected over some time, and there'll be a characteristic time scale that it takes for it to get infected. So what you turn it into there will be, instead of probably this one being turned on in the next time step, you will translate it into, there is a probability P that this turns on in 17 time steps, and 1 minus P that it never turns on. If it turns on, it's going to be this characteristic thing. Yeah. So it will delay the spread as well if you've kind of got that mechanism where it's being repeatedly tested. So you can do things. That's the thing. You can modify all these guys and move them out into all these different, right? You add to these kind of adjacent models. You just have to keep it simple enough that it's useful and meaningful. Yeah. I mean, that's an obvious thing to do. Yeah. I mean, it's definitely a necessary thing to do, but it was hard to do to start with. Okay, so I think I want to, that's partly what I want to show you with this one, and then, let's look at the wrong thing. So does that help a little bit? Some details with that one. You're going to work through it, and let me refresh you with the difficult problem. So this is saying these things. So in fact, the initial condition can never be in here. For this particular shape, I mean, these are general maps of the interval. But for this disease spreading situation, you make your G function. Boom, it's, you know, right, you've got your degree distribution, K, P, K over the average. You have to do all these sums and all these crazy things. You construct it, and then you have in building that, it has an initial phi0, probability that things are infected, that informs how this is shaped. So there's some just initial condition. The point is it will never be between here and here, because that's above a stable fixed point and below an unstable one, and it will go that way, and that's not what this mechanism does. So in fact, you can't be here. No, you can't be here or here. You'd have to be in here. Similar story here. You can't be here. You'd have to be here. Okay, let me talk about this weird situation after that. Okay, right. So we sort of scooted through this at the end. This plot here, so this is average degree of random network. Here, these are average thresholds. So we've got a pure Edish random network, make that, and then ascribe thresholds to everyone, just these normal threshold response functions. And there's going to be a standard deviation for the thresholds, and there's going to be a mean value, right? So there's a spread. And the mean is going up as we move across here. That's what this is. Now, the odd thing that we see, just to repeat, because this really is a strange thing, if you go up here, we're increasing network density, right? So we make a network, run the simulation, go and get another network that's a little bit denser, average degree is higher, and then see what happens. And the final size is here for say, it's about here, 0.2. 0.362, which is indicated by this one here, has this thing. So it's got so there's a phase transition there. As you're traveling up here, there is an increase in size. It's not like there's nothing. This looks pretty dark, but there's actually, there's something. There's a final size. It spreads. But then it goes, and then you go a little further out to here, and the final size is pretty plateaued, right? So these are slices, if you like, through here, here, and out here. Not quite. 3.8 is there. So this G function is changing in a way that allows this to happen, right? And this is a case where the initial condition is 0, and there are self-starters built in, which is sort of nicely done by this, because you've got a Gaussian distribution with a, say, 0.2, but it's got some standard deviation. that means there are some with negative thresholds. And if you like, you can just add up all the guys who have negative thresholds, just integrate that part and say they're self-starters. Because, right, if you've got a negative threshold, then your threshold is automatically exceeded by 0 being on. All right, so it always self-starts, so that's why there's always something, even when it's incredibly poorly connected, right? These are hard things to look at, rows, but here's the average degree of 1. These are just random networks, yet there's a final fraction that's infected. That's simply because a whole bunch of them turn on, right? They don't actually really infect anyone else. Little tiny islands. The whole network, there's no giant component tool here, right? Okay, so let's look at this, and I have some more plots I've added. Here's the G function. Oh, no, this is not the G function. Here's the output of the G function. I'll have the G function on the next plot. Let me actually just go to mine. That'll be better. Yeah. All right, here are the G functions behind this madness, right? This is for this case here, right? So this is what's really happening. If you start with 0 seed, that's what this is. This is the fixed point here. Start with 0, it's going to go up to here, 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 here. But here it goes boom, right? Because this is an unstable fixed point. The first stable fixed point above it is way up there. And there's what's happened is this whole shape has bent around and created a bifurcation here. So it goes stable, unstable, stable. And then here's our little saddle node bifurcation. It's a little snozzer here. It's got a little beak here. And there's another one over here. And as you move up through this average threshold, these two merge, which is a lovely kind of physics thing, yeah. And now there's a roof. Little things can't take off. So these pictures correspond to this. So let's walk through them. So this is, I use the average degree. So 1 with the brackets, 2, 3, 4, across to 10. So that's what's happening here. So it's going to be this, up to 10. So here's the G plot. There's a tiny little cobweb diagram in there. So it starts at 0 and it just goes as far as it gets. So we increase the average degree, this new network, plot right? Because that changes the G function. The G function contains the initial fraction they're on, which is 0 in this case, and the degree distribution is built into it. So you have to recompute the whole thing. It's moved up a little bit. This is curved, right? So that's what's happening. This is slowly increasing. So as we go across to 3, this is average degree 3, so we're here. Average degree 4, we are here. So, but something's happened here where, and it's impossible to see here, but really, right, it's above here. There's only one crossing. And now there are 3 crossings, right? So it goes across, comes back up, and goes down. Which still means, though, that there is a stable fixed point here, right? Crosses, so it goes, hits it. Then it comes back, there will be unstable, stable again. So that's this advent of this piece here. But you're still only getting to here. You don't know this is here. Like if you're dialing through systems, you're like, yeah, it's getting whatever. No, it's no big deal. And then phase transitions are exciting.
I think I understand what you're saying. So you're down here and then you jump up.
Yeah.
What are the other, what are those other points there?
The red ones?
Red and like.
Yeah, so these are the unstable fixed points. So these are actually, if you go to here, let's do this one. There's a crossing here of the y equals x line. There's a crossing here, and there's a crossing here. So if you do, this function equals theta, or this function minus theta equals 0, find the roots of it, that's what these are. These are the roots of them. So it's these crossings, it's these points. So theta, when theta, what is it, maybe 0.2, right? That's a stable fixed point. And that's this one, say. We're on 4. It's this one here. So anything if you start in between here, it will go up to this guy. Of course, where you start is governed by the thing. The only starting point we have for this is 0, because we've made it. But in general dynamical systems, you could start anywhere, and you'll end up at the nearest stable point. So if you're a little bit past it, then it's hard to see, but this thing has gone below the y equals x line. And so if you start in here, you actually travel down to that stable fixed point. You go that way. So if you start in here, you go down. And if you start above it, you go up, right? So again, there's a fixed point here. If you start here, you go down. If you start here, you go up to it. So the two fixed points in this system are here and here. Stable fixed points, I should say.
For average degree from 5 to 8, is there only one fixed point?
Yeah, so let's look. So this, and I realize we could magnify it. So what happens here is that there are two fixed points here, and they merge, two solutions to the root equation, if you like, that merge and pop off. And so they've gone above the y equals x line. So now a tiny little thing, there's a little channel that can get through. Your little cobweb goes all the way up to here. So that's what's happened. So now it has free, and that's true here, right? There's a tiny little, right, y equals x line, but if you expanded this, there's a tiny little gap here. And it goes all the way through, that's all the way through, all the way through, but then it actually moves back. It moves back and moves back, and at this point, by here, it's crossed the line, and you've got a stable fixed point again.
And that's the little thing.
And that's the end of it, yeah.
Sorry, what are the other two?
So the other two, so this is all for one particular threshold distribution. This is for where there's a lower mean threshold, and then here's a higher threshold. So there's a standard deviation of 0.2, and we're just sliding this little threshold distribution along. And as you slide through here, you get this strange behavior. Is that okay? I wanted to explain this a little better. Maybe I didn't.
I think I understand it better than I did.
Okay. Need the pictures, yeah.
Just curious, this specific function you're applying is sort of back to, because we have 3 roots at least, we know we have at least 3 roots here.
Yeah, you have 3 roots in this section and in this little
Well,
section.
we don't know, I don't know the function, so it could have n roots, but the rest of them are imaginary. But
All outside of,
or outside.
yeah, from 0 to 1, that's right.
What sort of function was this? Like, what was the...
It's a random, Edish-ready random network. So we're going to take,
You're actually just taking this, so
let's go back to it. Yeah, it's this thing on top,
right, so,
plus on degree distribution here. Sum it up.
okay, so you did it for just a general one?
Yeah, and then the threshold thing is this Gaussian that's being assigned.
Yeah, that's right, that's what I was thinking.
And it's Gaussian is being assigned, which means that the BKJs become kind of a cutoff, right? So that you've got some threshold, there'll be some number of friends on for which you switch on, and then you switch on for any number of friends above that as well, and then you've got some number below. And it could be 0. Right. So everyone has a threshold response function. Yeah, so you have to compute that thing, right? Yeah, numerically, right. So does that kind of help? I mean, you don't have to go very far away from these simple models to get some weird things that are hard to understand. Okay, so that's good. I did have I really wish I could get this to work again, but this is completely irrelevant. But it's a pangolin. And then we'll talk about some
He's gonna
other
go in.
pieces.
Oh, I just know he's gonna go in.
Yep.
Oh, I knew he was gonna go in.
Oh, that's interesting. We'll turn off the volume. Okay, that's good. Okay.
Man, I hope he walks himself back to the house.
It's supposed to be a
tonight, because
therapeutic
I don't
moment
want
for
him to
everyone.
carry him.
Good. Including the pangolin, right? Yeah. I mean, which part of the world? It's Asia, right? Aren't they? We have some of you biology people. No? No? It's Asia, right? I think so. Yeah.
I think for a pangolin, life just doesn't get any better.
World Penguin Day. Awesome. I have some other little pieces like this today, so we'll. I think they're in the wrong thing. Okay, let's have another therapeutic moment. Sorry. I'm going to skip. either I'm going to rebuild all these slides. I don't know what to do with this. Assortativity, I just want to mention it. I'm going to either rebuild them, we'll skip them at least. But it's pretty, this is using a Newman approach, which frankly is not as good as a probabilistic one. I mean, it is probabilistic, but there's a better way of doing it. This is sort of a matrix approach. Basic idea is right. You know, maybe I'll just say this much, right? Probably the connecting two nodes is, you know, can depend on degree, their age, all sorts of things. You could add all sorts of flavors to why nodes are connected, and you can build that into all your contagion things, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a nice thing. This gets pretty insane. And a nice thing to do is, and I'll show you just one or two results, but a nice thing to do is to measure the assortativity of networks, right? That's a natural thing to do. And a simple thing is do nodes with a certain degree connect to nodes with another degree with some proclivity, whatever it is. That's a natural thing to measure. Yeah.
Can you do assortativity with more than one attribute?
Sure. Yeah. So you can do anything. So if you have a little list of features for this node and another list of features over here, it don't even have to be the same list, but as long as you have some way of connecting those things mathematically, then you can build it. Yeah, it's like a similarity thing. Yeah, so you can have an affinity kind of thing, so you can make it like that. And in fact, that's one way of actually constructing a scale-free network you can give everyone a weight, which we talked about, I think. And probably the two nodes are connected then is a product of their weights. And with reasonable weight distributions, you can actually produce power law type things. This Edish-Rennie version of that is everyone has weight 1, right? And then you normalize it according to the average number of connections you want to put in. There's lots of other stuff in here. It's usually very hard to, so it's usually possible to make truly assortative things. So if you think about degrees, okay, so here's a good question. So you have a network, you've got degree 1 nodes, degree 2 nodes, degree 3 nodes, 4, 5, 6. So what's the most assortative version of that? Randomly rewire them, which can be hard to do if you've got a network to randomly increase the assortativity. It's like increasing clustering is hard. But the assortativity here is about degree. So if you guys have this, if these two nodes have the same degree, then that's thought to be assortative. So degree 10s want to connect to the degree 10s, degree 1s to 1s. What does that mean? And you want to think of an infinite one. If you don't have an infinite one, then you don't have enough matching. Yeah. Which are right. So they're cliques. Cliques. Yeah. So ones will be connected to ones. The ones with no friends are over here because that's where they always are. And then the two, right. You have triangles and right. Okay. So that's sort of an important thing to do. And then this is to show, and we're not going to go into it, but maybe I'll come back to it. But it's very hard to make disassortative things, right? So we'll say you've only got degree 1 to degree 5 in this network. So now you are trying to connect the 5s to the 1s and the 1s to the 5s, but the 3s are connecting to 3s still, right? Or maybe something else. They're trying to, if you sort of did it in that way, like just turned the list upside down, but you want them to be connecting to something else, 5s or 1s. You can't really do it. So if it's categorical, then you can do it. If it's just categorical, then you just, right, you have different teams, A, B, C, D, then and you don't worry about degree, say, then you can do that too, right? And then that's not so bad. But it can be hard to force them to be, so that's just a thing to know. It can be hard to force them the other way. Depending on the situation, I'm going to just tell you things, depending on what your contagion process is, assortative networks might be better or worse, right, for spreading. One model, which you guys have worked on a little, some versions of it, is degree 3 nodes and degree 1 nodes, right? So we've played with this one. So you can imagine adding a sortativity to that now. So the degree 3 nodes at one limit only connect to degree 3 nodes, and the other limit, the degree 1 nodes are only connected, at the same time, 1s are connected to 1s. So you've got all these little pairs, and then the 3s connecting to each other makes an infinite network. Right? There's no way, there's no cap, they just keep going. It's a beta lattice or a Cayley tree. So you get spreading on that part, but nothing on the 1s. And it depends on the relative abundance of them. But then you can tune it the other way, and you have to make sure the relative abundance is correct, so you'd need 3 1s for every 3. So that as you tune the assortativity the other way, you end up with just 3s that are capped with 1s. And so they're all disconnected. Yeah. So that's different, which the thing that you've played with is changing the balance of them, right? Sort of all 1s or all 3s, that's the tune. But you can also tune it so that you have 3 1s for every 1 3, so that's fixed. And now you're going to tune the way they're connected. So it can, right? You've got something, there's a dial there that will massively change the outcome. So degree distribution is huge, but then there are these pieces on top that really could, massively affect what goes on as well. Just from a raw standpoint, the average degree being what it is, well, I guess 1 in that case, means you think, okay, well, this thing could spread, stuff could spread on this, but it will then depend on how things are connected. I was going to say this. We're going to have some therapeutic stuff. This is pretty great.
Oh, buddy, wait. Okay.
So this is a dad. He's had a great time. He's done all sorts of things with his kid. This is a pretty, contagion. This is good contagion material.
Let's see it, buddy.
The innocent. This is great. I got to do it. Sorry. I don't know if I'll ever get those embeds working.
What do you have?
Got it to go in his eyes. It's really good.
Nice.
Subtitles.
You remember how to use it?
Just had a great time. All right. That's pretty much what I want to show you about assortativity was the fun bits. This is some work on this. This is Newman's from a long time ago. So a little piece to tell you about here. I don't want to grind you into the ground. The general story was that social ones seem to be more, at least for degree. This is just degree. So this is something where we just have knowledge of degree. What's this?
Negative assortativity? So here you have negative, I thought assortativity varied between 0 and 1. So is it between -1 and 1?
Yeah, -1 and 1, because you have a Pearson correlation coefficient. Sorry. Yeah. So no assortativity, no correlation is 0. Yeah, right. That dial I was talking about before that's another parameter, right? Okay. This is early work, and the kind of observation was that technological and biological ones tend to be disassortative to some extent. But so there are food webs here. We have to look at what they are. Neural networks. This is early on. It'd be interesting to see this done again properly with bigger data sets and so on. And these are social, but you can see this is before Facebook, right? This is before Twitter, which of course is some glimpse of social phenomena, but we didn't have that. Email address books were one thing. So these seem to be these aren't incredibly high correlation coefficients, tend to be a little more assortative, maybe. Yeah, so what we took, these are from the IMDb thing. I want to say database, but it's not. IMDb database. There was a place that we used to park our car in New York City called MTP parking, and the MTP stood for more than parking. So it was more than parking. Anyway, that happens. So this is, of course, from the archive. Yeah. All right. So there are a couple of good things to know, and there's some results here of spreading. Look, see this. I'll just show you how maniacal this gets. Right? Yes. right? Generating functions. Now you've got, you're not just, you have a special generating function for each degree. So now you're asking for it, right? So boom, boom. But this can be done much better with probabilistic stuff. So you have to do all this madness. Look at this. Anyway. So this becomes a slightly different thing. For things to spread, you want that the largest eigenvalue of a matrix is greater than 1. Instead of this gain factor before where we talked about exponential growth, you just need a quantity greater than 1. Now it's like there's a matrix involved. Okay, so I don't think we're going to show those things. You can see why I had these. Okay, fine. Let's look at some more of these. Yeah. Anyway, you know about it now. This is good. Hot lava. This should be it. Therapy. Wow. This is good work. Music. It's great. Really nice job. One more, and then we'll do something else. Ooh. I like it is a reference to, I think, RoboCop. Anyway. I don't know where it's playing again, but there you go. High quality. Okay. Thank you, Dad. Okay, so I had a few extra little things before we start on this next centrality stuff. This one I just mentioned to some of you guys before. This is cool. It turns out just a little bit, but the moon, being where it is, so squeeze, it makes the atmosphere, right, opens the atmosphere up a little bit, and it changes rainfall levels, which apparently we just found out. So, although farmers might have known this for a long time. Yeah. I mean, people have known about air pressure changes based on the moon. This is not the phase, it's just where the moon is, right? It's the, yeah. Anyway, that was pretty great. I mean, it's kind of surprising. It's pretty small, yeah. Cricket update over the weekend. This is how it finished, which is insane. You should know this. No, I was reading this unfold, and the numbers just appeared. West Indies, as you know, beat England, which is a great joy for everyone who's not English. It's true. It's true. This is this is good. Yeah, total destruction for Stokes. Anyway, great. Wow, this is great. Cricket update. So that was good. Worked on this a little bit. So now assignments have their own little world and all this sort of stuff, right? So these things are sorted out. Worst things happen at sea is where you are now, and that is due this Friday. And there will be links to everything. It's going to be a quadripartite network. Yeah. This thing, I was looking this up because I wanted to find this piece. So there's this paper. Look at this title, right? This is the press picks up on this, right?
That's such a Forbes title.
Yeah. Yeah.
The most Forbes article title ever.
They love it. This was just money for them. So this was some work done. Yeah, right. So this West Federal Institute of Tech, and it's looking at ownership. And I mean, I vaguely understand how this works, but they're looking at ownership between companies, and I think it's companies owning pieces of other companies. I think that's what it is. It's this usual kind of big distribution. So here's a network story, right? I mean, that seems pretty serious. So 737 out of 43,000 corporations own 80%. It's the usual very, very skewed distribution. 147 own how much? Right, it's true. 37 million companies, but 43,000 are transnational. And then 40% is owned by 147. Yes, so this is an interesting piece of this. So let's see. Yeah, so privately held is excluded. It's dominated by banks. So I was going to ask you about this. I mean, but look, Barclays is at the top. So these are all, JP Morgan, UBS, Vanguard, right? So it's all this sort of stuff. There's a paper that comes or another. No, that's New Scientist, and then this is actually in Forbes, and pointing out that these things are owned by people, by investors, right? So while it might be very kind of tight in some sense as to what's owned, then the humans are outside hedge funds, and they're not they're people. What are they? They are owning these companies as well. So it's a bit complicated, but great headline.
Yeah, excellent headline. Do you mind scrolling down to that list again?
Sure.
So some of these Vanguard stands out to me is actually shareholder owned.
Yeah, that's the thing. They're all shareholder owned. So that's what that next article says. Well, actually, they're not evil. They're not these, companies that you can't see. They're all.
A more interesting study would be of estimated ownership. Actually, this is been down a little bit. Estimated market power and ownership of government-sponsored enterprises and private companies. It's much more opaque. And in terms of if you actually
Could you get the data?
if someone
Okay.
to a pretty limited to actually a decent extent over their market share and how much things are worth, you can get a pretty good idea. Not as obviously they don't have the same public accounting requirements as the public health organizations. You can get a pretty good idea.
All right. Well,
And
it's.
if you want an actual story, like the top X% hold this much wealth, that is what you want to look at. Privately held companies.
Well, what's the wealth? Well, there's also market capitalization, right? Which is a made up. Those sorts of things.
When I just hear the title control.
What's the biggest? Yeah, that's right. Control's kind of a funny term. What's the biggest private corporation?
Private corporation.
Or an example of?
Let's see. I think Koch Industries is the largest. Glencore might be larger. The Swiss.
Is Unilever private?
Unilever's not. I don't think. It could be.
I mean, it shows you. I have no idea. Like I just thought, oh, I'm going to see Unilever or something, but it's all banks. It's all the ones that invest. I have no feel for this.
I mean, if you put Sinopec or Gazprom or Saudi Aramco or like the big state-owned oil companies next to these,
Yeah, those guys.
any private company.
Wow. This I've showed you guys before, but I thought you might want to play. I mean, it's an old thing, but it's sitting around. I just sort of finish up some pieces. It starts with Amazon, actually. So this is the Amazon board, and then I guess it's really connecting people who are on other boards. I mean, it's an extremely interesting thing to look around. So this character here is on Google and the Aspen Institute. PepsiCo has a connection. Maybe it's a vacant seat. Is that what that is? I wondered about that. Maybe it's a vacant seat. American Airlines, yeah.
They just have somebody retired.
So it's actually updated. I mean, it's just such an interesting thing. So I don't know. I mean, there's this to be studied really well as well. So and the thing to maybe look at. Oh, is that just maybe it's the. Is it really? Right. Okay. Popular maps. Yeah, popular maps. And so people can make their own, I think, is what's going on. Let's click on McDonald's. Oh, that seems a little sad. Wow. Wow. Okay, so these are a little bespoke maybe because I think you can just choose the ones you want and then save it. So someone has gone out of their way to choose some avatars. All right. Wow. That's not worth studying, but you could probably learn something that you knew about humans from that behavior as well. Wow. Good. Well noticed. It's disappointing. Oh dear. Yeah, they've definitely. That's not right. Yeah, they've thought about it. This one's pretty slim. Anyway, huge thing. It's been around for a long time. This is a little visualization that just appeared. I thought the title for this or the headline for this was a little odd because it's trying to compare everyone. So it seems a little. The Bernie people will be upset. But I just really want to show you this visualization. Pretty cool, right? So these are based on how much they support either of these two candidates. Kasich is not being mentioned here. Plus, it would mess up the graph. This is pretty sweet little things. They've done these before, but they should show them more. Ban Muslims, deport illegal immigrants, blah, blah, blah. This is worried about the economy. Outsider, it's got to be Trump. Experience. That's interesting, actually. I don't. That's funny. Yeah. Angry. Are the voters angry, or do they want someone who's angry? As we clarified, the voters feel betrayed. That's great visualizations. I mean, right?
It looks like a middle finger too.
There's one. There are some versions that really give you that structure. Yeah. Yeah. And then we've got Sanders. So this is Vermont is over here doing whatever it wants. Oh, it's going to pop up. Let's see if Vermont can join anyone on anything. Bernie is now just went even further this way. Wow. And now it's in the middle. No, they never asked about terrorism. Canadians. I mean, that's a huge can win. Hanging out. It believes. Vermont didn't actually really believe, to be honest, though. That wasn't. I guess they were impartial or something. No, I don't know. Maybe it was 50-50. Anyway, it's great visualization. It's cool. Worried about economy. That's going to be, no? There you go. So the surveys aren't done in all these things. Anyway, all right. That's just a little thing. Okay, fun. That's right. Well, what's it saying? It's giving you that, I think, right? So these are stronger support, right? If you ask them about this, how does that correlate with them? Yeah. And not all the states have been surveyed. Anyway, what's today? Today is Wisconsin. Let's see what happens. All right. What is the rest of this thing? That's weird. Okay. Sorry. Acroread. Okay, so let's talk about, let's start talking about centrality. Let's just get rid of this, I think. It's having a terrible problem. Okay. All right. This will lead naturally into structure detection, which is interesting. That's true, but let's get somewhere first. Okay. Oh. I'm having terrible trouble. Okay, this can go away here. I hope you were able to come to the talk yesterday, if you could. It was, we will have video of it. I'm having so much trouble. Okay. Come on. Come on. Okay. Fine. All right, so we're going to go through increasing complexity of, nothing's going to be outrageous, but there will be some fun linear algebra. These guys, degree centrality, the most naive thing, closeness, betweenness, eigenvalue centrality, which got a lot of traction in social science. Sounds pretty cool because eigenvalues, hubs and authorities. All right, so what's the most important node, right? If someone gives you a network, you can imagine all sorts of things about it, of course, that it has weights and so on and so on. We'll do a lot simply with just, of course, what we have to do is just the basic stuff with unit weights, all right? We have to do that. Right, so it could be edges as well. If we think about transportation structures or there's movement between these things around this network, then if you've got one little bridge holding together two networks, then that's going to be important. So you want some algorithm that lights that up, and you can start to think about how you do that. And of course, if that's an individual, then they're kind of a translator or an interpreter or someone who connects to worlds. So they're important, potentially important. That all depends on whether things actually spread around. So it could be that they're handling lots of material, whatever it is, they're actually moving things around. The bridge, where they're, it's information. I mean, you could have it could be a bridge that I just explained, but it could be, a central artery in a city, right? It's just a lot of stuff. It's right in the middle of it all. It might not be something that has an enormous number of, output itself, but affects things further and further away. So now we have to start to get some sort of non-local measure that's being repeated somewhere else, right? Could be the oracle, only one person talks to the oracle. Right. So how do we measure this? And well, usual business so far with networks is lots of ad hoc things that are, increasingly, hopefully, defensible. All right, so the simplest thing for importance to start with, well, all right, it's going to be centrality. This idea that it's central in some way to the network, that it, like in a sort of a geometric sense, but there's something about it that makes it, its removal dangerous, if you like. We could do that. Social networks, as I said, sort of the origin of some of these things. Some have sort of an implied dynamics put on top of it, that the idea of, we'll see this with shortest paths, for example, the idea that there are things moving even though there might not be. Right? So if you take a big social network like Facebook and you measure the shortest paths, which they did again recently, right, to measure the 3 degrees of separation or whatever it is now, I mean, those shortest paths aren't necessarily functional things. But still, it's a good, graph theory was kind of connected, you see, to social network analysis. There were graph theorists in there, so they thought in a different way. Anyway, we'll build this. We're going to get to communities in the next piece, and that's going to be a centrality thing. There's going to be some centrality again. So the simplest thing is degree centrality. Well, this is actually, this is a thing. It's just how many friends you have, right? So you just rank everyone by the number of friends. It's a start. So, of course, it's linearity, right? There's the idea that if you have twice as many friends, you're twice as important, et cetera, et cetera. All right, so we've just got to say these things. And there's nothing about the network as well. So that's the end of that. But, this is something you'll see mentioned. And, of course, there is some importance to having higher and higher degrees, but it's probably not what we're thinking about here. It could be the one who runs the cult over here will be the most important, but it's just a bunch of groupies in a jungle. With a dubious drinking liquid. Sorry.
If you have weights on your edges, would it be a little better to look at weighted degrees?
Yeah, so you'd look at weighted, right. So in that case, you'd look at weighted degree, you'd still sort of stop at the same. You'd be okay, yeah. Most of these things you can generalize to have weights, I think. It takes longer to compute. That's sort of that's probably what stops people. Okay, so closeness centrality, that you can reach other nodes, fair enough. So that's a very physical kind of idea, that you really are central to this landscape. So you have to have and we'll go through this, many of you have seen this sort of thing if you've been in computer science, but we have to think about finding all the shortest paths. And then, let's see, so this closeness centrality is a little funny, right? But we're going to add up all of these shortest path distances. We start at some node I, and then measure all the shortest paths to everyone else, add them all up, and it's an inversion of that thing. So, right, if we flip this thing upside down, then it's your average shortest path length to everyone else. So the smaller that is, the more central you are. And so a simple thing is just put the inverse of that, right? To make bigger, more important, more salient. That's so this is a little funny. So the shortest distance, if you're not connected, then we just say it's infinite. Which is a little cheaty, but and if you're the central hub to everyone else, then you've got n minus 1, right? N minus 1 times 1 on the bottom, so you get your 1. Okay, fine. It's a little ad hoc, not bad, but it's a bit ad hoc. Okay. And from this you'll get an ordering of importance, and that can and people use this very functionally all the time. Use these sorts of things when they're trying to measure, how to fill potholes or something like that, or how to fix up power grids. You it's very nice if you have an order of importance of things that need to be looked at. That's great. You just then put it on a list. But you need to do a good job, right? Very natural thing to do. You need to do a good job. Depends on your system. So we're talking about pretty abstract ones here. Betweenness. All right, so let's get to betweenness. So this is a good one. Okay, so now it's shortest paths again, but it's about really where they travel. So before it was shortest, the thing before, the closeness one was you stand at a node and then look at shortest paths emanating from it. But now you want to think about, well, how many shortest paths is this node on, right? So how important is it? If stuff is moving around, how important is this node or an edge? So that gets to more of the idea of a transportation or a traveling, and it could be messages, it could be cars. But it does also say that every node wants to send messages to every other node with equal probability, which is silly. But, you can see what's happened. This is a mathematically convenient kind of thing to play with that's better than what we had before. But you need to always keep remembering the issues. Yeah, right, so if certain nodes or edges are disproportionately involved, then they're more important, right? And so that's going to help us with this structure detection thing. And if you think about, so I just mentioned this one, right? So if you have two networks, and then one little bridge, and it could be a bunch of nodes, all of those will have huge betweenness scores, right? Because we're saying, well, every node here wants to communicate with every other node, so there's going to be all of this traffic that has to go through this little bridge when you compute all the shortest paths. So, and then, assigning those scores, you say, well, if we cut one of these, then the thing's going to potentially fall apart, and that will give us a way of strategically kind of cutting up the network. So you can see kind of what would happen if you did this iteratively, right? If you had 4 big, fairly well-connected components with some thin edges between them, you compute all of these betweenness scores, and they'll be really high between these communities. And so if you start to prune those away, eventually you should see these 4 communities appear. So that's a nice idea, and it's sort of a basis for a whole world of structure detection. Many ways to do it, but that's one. Okay, so you just got to count how many shortest paths go through you, and you can ignore the ones that, is that right? Ignore the ones that start and end at you. Don't include those. Same with an edge. And then you have to be a little thoughtful about this, right? So what do we do if there are ties, right? So if there are 2 ways to get there, then each route would get a half, for example, right? So you imagine that you trace out all of the shortest paths, you know what they are, you trace them all out, and you put a bean down every time you travel on each one of these shortest paths, and then beans stack up at edges and nodes. All right. But if there are 7 ways to go, then each you divide your beans into 7s, and you allocate them like that. Okay. Because they're both important. If we're thinking about flow, that's okay. Yeah. Now we're not thinking about any kind of natural flow, like if we have electrical impedance or something like that. We'll generalize to that later on. We've already, we have looked at that with optimal supply networks, but we'll come back to it. Okay, so so we'll have B for betweenness. It's just the frequency, and yes, the ones that where they start and end, they don't get beans. All right. Sorry. That should be, it works for weighted and unweighted ones. And so so weighted one starts to bring in an impedance idea, right? So it depends how the weighting works, but basically it starts to tell you if you have, it might be actually 3 links to get from here to this other node and 2 links this way, but these could be high impedance ones, right? So you actually want to travel this way, and you have to compute the distance or the effective, maybe time. That would be a better way to do it. Okay, end nodes, M edges. So you want to find these n choose 2 shortest paths. There's a whole sequence of things that were produced by computer scientists back in the day. I don't know, is this the 60s or 50s maybe? These are older. Do you know about these things? Do they even teach you these things anymore? Yeah, this is 959. Yeah, well, there you go. It was published. Floyd is 962. Of course, you go back and you find people who did other things. Warshall 62, 59.
So we're taught Cooney's algorithm, which is
This one.
related to.
Yeah. Okay. So it's the usual Stiglitz story, right? Who gets the win? Not Stiglitz. Stigler's law of eponymy. We should change it. Yeah. Right. Merton's law of eponymy. Right. Because really Merton said it. Yeah. So these are slow, though, I think, right? I believe this to be true. Then we have this dark. These are finding the shortest paths between two specific nodes, but we have to do all of them, right? So we want to do all of them. Yeah. If you have sparse networks, you're going to pull this one out of the box. These are, I don't know if these are really an advance, but it seems, from what I understand, these were for this particular problem. You're trying to find all shortest paths, but not remember them necessarily. You're just trying to put the beans down. Yeah. Okay.
They're equally fast in big O notation because big O doesn't count memory use.
Okay. Yeah,
When you're computing, the other problem is a lot of the fast algorithms are horrible.
will destroy you.
And then
You need a brain the size of the universe.
For example, there are linear sorting algorithms that run in big O n, but they're slower than big O n squared.
Oh, really? In practice, yeah. There's also a prefactor, right? Which.
Yeah, the constant can matter a lot.
Okay, so we'll walk through these. So order mn. So m is the number of edges, n is the number of nodes as usual. If they're weighted, then things jump, right? That's not great. Let's see. So here's the plan. It's breadth first search, classic way. I mean, this is how you do a lot of contagion things, and if you're modeling. So you start at node I, and we have to go through. So we're going to have to go through all of them. Start at node I. And say you have a little distance variable, so you set that to 0, and then you look up the list, or get a little list of the neighbors, and each of them. So you might have a vector, right? So you have a vector for everything, for all the nodes, and so assign 1 to all of the neighbors, and we're going to fill this vector in as we march out through the network. But we're going to do it in this. I don't have a picture here. Node, and then the first degree kind of characters are 1 step away, 2 steps away, 3 steps away. Okay, so now you have to go to your first neighbors, your friends here, and then find their friends, right? So compile a list of their friends. So this is a little bit harder now because now you have to look your table up, compile that list, and get rid of any copies, ones that you've seen before. So if they already have a distance ascribed to them in this distance vector, you ignore them. And if you've already visited them in this little list of friends, you ignore them as well. So you get your unique set of new neighbors. That's this. And then all of those get distance too. And then then you just keep repeating this, right? So you look at your new neighbors become your old neighbors. You find all of their friends, which will include a bunch you've already visited. And you ignore those because you've already visited them because you've given them a distance. I mean, I'm just sort of saying a simple way to do this. Okay, so this is just for one node, right? And this is giving you the shortest paths as you're doing it, right? So this is telling you from node I, this is the shortest path between node I and node J, right? Because we're slowly getting out there. We may arrive at node J, from 5 different directions at once after 17 steps, but that's going to be, we are guaranteed to do that with breadth first search. It's going to be more complicated with weighted ones because it's just a stickier business. Okay. So you have to record this. So you have to record where you've gone. So you do have to remember some stuff here. So this is pretty good, and we're going to get n-1 shortest paths from this, right? You've got your one anchor node, you're going to n-1 other nodes, and you'll get all those shortest paths. All right, and we've recorded this tree. It's a bit of a complicated tree because it's not just a purely branching thing, it has potentially arcs. So this is here, for example. So starting node, we move out through this tiny little network. This one is 1 step away, 2 steps away, right? So that's the shortest path of length 2, 2 this way, and so on. And so we've recorded this. So now we can go back to the leaves. We can start, we remember our last ones we visited, and we can, or the leaves, and we can march back through this network. Because now we have to go back and say that, for instance, this guy is on this shortest path and gets 1 bean. This one's going to get 2 beans because it's on this shortest path. And sorry, it's on this shortest path, and this shortest path, so it gets 3 beans. Yeah. And for edges, which is really shown here, you can do edges at the same time. Let's see, so you've done this. So if you go back here, so you walk back up here, you're going to drop a bean here on this edge and a bean on this edge. Same with this, you walk back all the way up here, you drop a bean here, bean here, bean here, but then you also have to go to here, drop a bean here, and the same thing here. So this is like the river network story actually, right? So this is a basin story. So in fact, if you look out here, there are 4 nodes below it. That's going to be the flow here. Okay. So edges are kind of usually, many ways, the better things to look at. So it kind of works well here. So here's an example. Let's see if we can get this right. This is a more complicated story. So there were, how many shortest paths came out here, right? So we start here, we march out, we march out, we march out. And there are 2 ways to get to this one. 2 shortest paths arrive at the same time. 1 arrives here, and then you get 3 shortest paths arriving here. So now we go backwards, and this is going to be a sort of n-1 step operation. 3 came, but you know that 1 came from this direction, and you've recorded that 2 come from this direction. So you divide your beans. Instead of putting 1 bean here and 1 bean, instead of putting just 1 bean here, you know there's a 2-to-1 ratio, so you put 2/3 of your beans here and 1/3 here. And that's going to be the same kind of story here. You've got 1 bean, drops off here. When you get to here, you know there was one shortest path coming from here, so there's a 1, a 1/3, and a 1 for that one. So is that right? Yeah. 1 plus 1 plus a 1/3 is 7/3. Very good. Yep. This one has to be split, right? So there are 2/3 plus 1 for this one, because there was, is that right? It's not right, is it? Yes. 2/3 plus this one gets 1 bean, everyone gets 1 bean. So that's 5/3 if you add these things together. And now you have to divide them in 2. So 5/6 this way and 5/6 this way. And then the rest is not so bad. They accumulate together. 5/6 plus 7/3 plus 1 will give you that flow. 5/6 plus 1 will give you 11/6. And it should all add up, right? So it's 36/6, so there are 6 total, and that's what we started off with. So it's a flow story. Yeah, so you imagine that there's 1 unit of goop going in per unit time, and then flowing and being broken up in this way that matches the shortest paths. Yeah, super exciting. Okay, so that's one thing. You've started at 1 node. You've allocated beans based on that 1 node's shortest paths to everywhere else, and then you go to the next one. Because the shortest, maybe there are some sneaky things, I suppose. But generally speaking, this approach it forgets all the shortest paths and then starts again. Yeah, I mean, you shouldn't visit the last one, obviously, right? So you should be culling them as you go along. Okay. All right. All right, that's the basic plan. Okay, this is the story. This is just written down what I've said. So you end up with a betweenness, which is the number of beans that you get. It's pretty good. And this is this flow story if it's a pure tree network. River networks, we've said this, good. Edge betweenness is all built in at the same time. All these words are here. Yeah, No, it's okay. I'm just trying to figure out.
Is the betweenness like that useful though?
Yeah, so it has, I mean, people have tried to use it to, and you'll see this for this one in particular too, eigenvalue centrality, to assign, probably too strongly to assign importance to things. But it turned out to be very useful for structure detection because of this thing I was talking about. It. So it was, you know, it's a cobbling together of something that existed already. Okay, this is a betweenness measure. What you do see though is people just use it because it's got a nice name. They really do. They just use it betweenness, right? And those guys over there have been using it for ages. Betweenness. The TW is fun. It's a fun word to say. So, so I think there's a lot of that. It doesn't have, you know, this isn't the Navier-Stokes equation, right? It isn't something or electric. Right? It's not a fundamental thing. It is a, you know, sort of a sneaky plan. It's helpful. It gives you something for sure, and can actually be used fruitfully for other things. So that's been sort of demonstrated, but and to some level of robustness, right? So another way to do this, and we'll get to this, is just allow random walks, right? Or currents, right? So you have a node and another node. Instead of computing shortest paths, you just, you know, you've got humans. You just wire them all up, right? And then just jack some current into this one, and then take it out at this one over here, while they're on Facebook or something, and then just see where all the flow was, right? And then you do it with every pair, and then you get some scores, right? So you get some betweenness from that. You get similar results to, you know, if you then go and use this for other processes, you know, for something else, there's decent correlations between the betweenness you get from this approach and, say, a random walk one or an electrical circuit one. So because it is so ad hoc, you need to be able to do that sort of thing. You need to say, oh, you know, there's a lot of flexibility, and then we just sort of choose one that's a pretty good approach. It's definitely, you know, we're just sort of we've gone to the third one here. We're moving through gears here a little bit as we go up. And this is really page rank.
Yeah, I guess I was assuming that like connectivity of the ground was far more, like kind of fills the same role and is far more important.
Yeah.
It's not localized. It's not easy to use as a localized variable, but you often don't need that.
So connectivity, simply just whether it is or it isn't, or the degree to, you know, like average degree within a particular component. Well, that is a giant feature of it for sure. Yeah.
The problem with that issue though is it misses the local bridge.
Yeah, you wouldn't be able to pick out that character.
One company that sells a part for every single airplane in the US Air Force.
So you're starting to get a nuance, which we will have when I have some stuff on organizations, which will have that.
I mean, just as an example, but anything like that.
No, I know, I have a good example of that, yeah. Yeah, you need some robustness, and it will quickly show. Yeah. No, it's a different business, and it does, no, it gives you something that it starts to give you, it's doing this thing of ascribing, you know, somewhat commonsensically, you'll get bridges, right? You'll get bridges. But you'll also get, you know, really the central, if there isn't like a bridge structure like this, there's just a big blob, and there's some more central character, if there's a hub in the middle of it, then they will be picked up, right? It will get them. So it has some versatility there. Because hubs you're going to find, right? Hubs you're going to find with just the simplest thing, with this, degree centrality, and the closeness centrality. I mean, if you think about the extreme limit of just a pure hub, one node, bunch of friends, no connections between them, right? Just a star. Then, you know, these two light that one up. So with this as well, but things like a bridge is not going to be found by either of these, right? Because a bridge, you just have two friends. Of course, you know, it's two friends, right? But it's like a massive highway, so it's sort of not really the same as the little back street over there. So you've got to be careful with that. But these two, which we'll talk about on Thursday, they start to give you some more pieces. All right, so that is fine. That's a good place to stop. We have this one last assignment, and projects would be good to finally really get into. And is it possible we could present a little quick thing? You know, we normally do the quick thing, which would be just like a little mini conference day next Thursday. Or should we? The usual thing, 3 minutes or whatever. Yeah, and it might help us get through the rest of the semester there. Because we'll still have the final exam thing, which is whenever. I'm not sure when that is. I could look it up. I have it written down. Okay, all right, well, let's plan on that. Yeah. The same as last POX, yeah. I mean, I've been delaying it forever, but, you know, so. No, next Thursday. Let's be, yeah. The idea is you've got, in principle, assignment 10 is the end of this week, and no more assignments. Okay, thank you, people. All right, cheers. Okay.